This is Duke University.
Hi, I'm Peter Ubel, faculty here at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. That's not one qua, it's not two qua, it's a Fuqua. That's what my 10-year-old told me to remember how to pronounce the school's name. We are here on a live webinar to answer questions about liberty and obesity. I'm joined here by Avni Shah, who will be introducing herself in a second. We're following up with responding to some of the questions you've sent to us already by email in response to a webcast we posted a couple weeks ago about liberty and obesity, about whether the government should play any role in combating our nation's obesity epidemic, and if so, what kind of role should it play? It's a controversial topic. It's one of the reasons I want to not just talk at you, but actually converse here with Avni, where we sometimes agree and sometimes disagree with each other on the topic. Avni, welcome. Thanks a lot for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm a third-year marketing doctoral student studying consumer behavior. I'm particularly interested in initiatives to encourage healthier lifestyles and also increase financial well-being. It's fantastic to be here.
And Avni helps me teach the class I've taught here at Fuqua on consumer irrationality and market failure. So it's going to be a lot of fun to talk with you about this topic. If you have questions that come up during the webinar, you can tweet us at #FuquaAlumni, and we will do our best to try to get to those other questions. Avni, so you're a PhD student. You want to not just understand consumer behavior, but actually try to improve consumer behavior. So I'm curious what you think about a topic I brought up on the webcast of Mayor Bloomberg's decision to ban big gulp sodas in New York City. Is that a good approach, do you think, to improving consumer behavior?
Yes, I do actually. I think that nobody needs 219 grams of sugar in a 64-ounce soda, and that's exactly how much that is. And just in case you are not sure the quantity of that, I brought that along because I was shocked myself to figure that out. It's that much. That much you're consuming.
This is sugar.
Sugar.
This is from one 64-ounce beverage.
Yes.
And to what could be the harm of drinking that beverage?
I think that, yes, that's a good point, but actually I think that this much there's no way that this could be healthy for us. And banning the big gulp is one effort in order to limit the consumption of this amount of sugars.
So I will agree with you that the world is not a better place for people drinking big gulp sugars. I think that does not make the world a better place to drink big gulp sodas. But if the problem is the sugar, why are we aiming at the big gulp soda? I mean, there's sugar in a Starbucks peppermint mocha. There's sugar in cake and apple pie. I'm American, I love apple pie. Why are we picking on big gulp sodas and not picking on sugar?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that anything with that amount of sugar we should try to really curb efforts in order to reduce that. And there are many ways to do that. We could have a sugar ban, for example. You had talked about in the earlier webcast, taxing or putting a surcharge on unhealthy food that has a certain fat content. We could also, for example, reduce just a bit of the subsidies of high fructose corn syrup. There's also many ways. You actually know of several ways as well. What's your take on things that we could actually do?
Yeah, I think it's really important because there were definitely some of the questions that came our way with a lot of very understandable concern about whether we're here at Fuqua promoting government activity to regulate and thwart the marketplace. That's certainly not the focus of my writing, my teaching, my scholarship. And what we try to do when we teach here at Fuqua is to help students understand the kind of problems that are caused when consumers behave irrationally, and what the different range of government approaches can be to improve consumer behavior. And only at the extreme does that reach the point of banning behavior, like the big gulp soda ban. A ban I'm not a fan of, by the way. So that's why we try to really get people to understand that governments can start with actually pretty small nudges sometimes.
So what are other suggestions you think would work? Do
you remember the mortgage example we used in class that one time?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a great example. You should tell people about that.
So we had about, in the 75 students per section in the class that we taught. and just arbitrarily divided the room in half, left and right sides, not politically left and right, just where they happened to be sitting. And I handed out a mortgage form to everybody in the class from the same mortgage. And I ran a contest because Fuqua students are very competitive. And I said, okay, left side versus the right side, first one to get their hands up has a chance to answer the question. I said, what is the monthly fee, what's the charge for being late on a monthly payment? Right hand side of the room, hands went up. They gave the answer. Asked another question, I'm trying to remember what they were.
What's the interest rate or something like that?
Right side of the room goes up again.
And it's because all the smart students, right, sat on the right side?
That's what they were wondering, and they seemed to be looking at the left side of the room as if that were the case.
Right.
As it turns out, I gave the two sides of the room the same mortgage form information, but in different forms, and literally different paperwork. And one was the standard form that was used by a lot of banks, and another was a form that the federal government had developed after testing it among consumers to find out what was easier for people to understand. And they're pushing to mandate that all mortgages get put onto this simpler format. Here is an example with mandating the form of information in mortgage, where the government is not doing anything to force people to buy a house or not buy a house. They're instead requiring banks to give people information to promote informed consumer decision making. I think in effect, they're improving the functioning of the market. So that's an example of a very tiny nudge, just informing people, helping them make better choices.
But we've now talked pretty much about government, right? And what are the things that government can do. But there's so many different initiatives that non-government agencies are actually doing to encourage, again, healthier lifestyles and increasing financial understandings and literacy. So I think there are also non-government nudges that we could also use.
And absolutely something we talked a lot about in the class that we taught together. It's when you see a form of consumer irrationality that causes people to harm themselves, industry can often try to step in to help people make better decisions. So for example, here at Duke, the HR department, I believe that's who's behind this decision, has decided to add a $10 monthly surcharge to health insurance premiums for smokers. The idea being that smoking causes people to have more health problems, which actually drives up the cost of offering health care to people. So they're helping pay for some of those additional costs, because otherwise everyone else is bearing that cost. And then the really hope here is that $10 surcharge will be a reminder to people that, hey, you know, it'd be really better for you if you stopped smoking.
I actually know of one at Dartmouth, where I went to undergraduate, where they actually were trying to encourage people to use the gym and really exercise. And so what they did, it was this beautiful, beautiful gym. And it cost about $600 up front for a membership. For a gym membership.
For a year? Or
for 1 year. A gym membership, $600. And this place is pretty great. But
it's Dartmouth, of course.
I mean, yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful gym with TVs and everything. But the thing was is that if you went to the gym 3 times a week for 12 weeks in a row, so they viewed that as you're forming a habit, then they would reimburse you 2/3 of that amount. So you get a check cut for $400 back. So if you went and you started up January 1st, and 12 weeks later you've gone to the gym for 3 times, and you had to log 30+ minutes at the gym as well, and they monitored using your employee ID, then right at the end of that 12-week period, they would cut you a check for $400 to reimburse.
$400?
$400, 2/3 of that amount. So then your overall gym membership for this amazing facility was a total of $200 for the year.
So that's brilliant.
Right.
That's a great way. So it's a company in the sense, I mean, Duke is a company, Dartmouth's a company, but any industry out there that wants healthy employees could set up a similar program like that. And what they're doing is they're giving people a nudge to help them behave better and improve their own lives.
Yeah, and they actually found that people were using the gym more frequently even after that reimbursement period. That they had formed this habit, they felt really good, and during that 12 weeks they actually received, they had some results. They felt better about themselves. They, in some cases, lost weight, lowered their cholesterol. So then by that point, they wanted to continue forming that habit, and that was all through a little bit of incentives.
It's great, and I think habit is another theme we talk about in the course that we teach, because I'm a physician, I study decision making. I began my career studying kind of one-off decisions like, how does this patient decide between chemotherapy and surgery? And it turns out a lot of decisions we make aren't really thought through every moment in great rigorous detail that we make decisions. Often the decisions we have are really just habits we get into. And so what you really want to do if you want to improve people's behavior, you can't just look at how they think about something, but you want to know how to turn that into a habit, hopefully a good habit, not a bad one. But definitely habits are very powerful influences on behavior.
So one question that came in, though, is that, and I think it's a really interesting one, is that when people are, especially when we talk about healthier eating, right now there's a structure where a lot of the food and the healthy food, fruits and vegetables, are the highest dollar amount per ounce than some of these fast foods, such as the McDonald's hamburgers and all of these different things. What are ways that people, that you know of at least, that people could eat healthier but cheaply? Because that's one issue, is that folks that don't have that much money, how can they actually afford to eat healthier even if they want to, especially when they work maybe a few jobs, they're trying to encourage their kids to actually choose these healthier items?
That's a great question, and this is an area of active research. I think a lot of people in public health and in marketing departments around are trying to figure out how to solve this problem. Here's an idea I had the other day that I was talking about with a friend. She said she'd love it if this happened. It's why aren't more grocery stores putting out ingredients together for meal preparation? That's right there. I think what happens a lot of times, if you talk about the cost of food, there's no doubt a financial cost, but often the biggest cost to food is preparation. And it's finding a recipe, figuring out how to do it, make sure you have all the ingredients in the house, and when you don't, oh well, I'm going to go something that's pre-processed, pre-packaged, open package, insert in mouth, throw package away. And there's great economic studies that show one of the biggest causes of the obesity epidemic is that food has become much cheaper, more often in time cost even than in actual calorie per dollar cost. So I said, this is a market opportunity for people in the food business. Why not have every week you walk into the grocery store, there's 3 meals set out in one part of the store where they have the 4 main ingredients of it, everything else is salt and stuff that you typically have at home, with a nice ingredient card they can take for free, or a recipe card. You say, just buy these 4 things, here's the recipe, and it's a 15-minute of cooking, and it's a healthy meal, it's a variety in your life, which people love. This seems like the kind of thing, a great opportunity for people to take advantage of what consumers really need, which is, help me do this quickly, but healthily.
I think also, in a similar vein, some grocery stores have actually started having more prepared food, and hot bars, as well as the salad bars, that have actually increased the amount of people that choose to do that. It might be a tad bit more expensive than obviously preparing it yourself naturally, but I know people in a rush, especially busy people, working people, want that option and find it easier than obviously, and more tasty than going to, for example, McDonald's. Yeah,
and that's great. And so if these professionals, cooks and chefs can do this and find healthy fare that we can get and affordable, both in terms of money and time cost, that'd be great. And so I think a key in trying to think about how to improve behavior, and this came up in a number of the questions, is we need to go beyond a standard economic model for what influences people's behavior. So at Dartmouth, you could tell someone up front, hey, it'll be $200 a year to come to the club and exercise. And that would have a very different effect on behavior than pay $600 and we'll give you $400 back if you show up. It'd be different than if you charged them every time they showed up a certain amount of money that could cost them probably less than $200 a year depending on how often they show up. But all these things could have different effects on behavior. Back to the Duke surcharge on smokers. I think a more effective thing, and the HR department didn't ask me this in advance, but here's my opinion if you happen to be watching. $10 a month? You think that'll really work when a pack of cigarettes practically costs that much? And just quitting smoking would save you way more than that. How about calling it $120 a year? Same amount of money. Economic theory would tell us it should have the same effect. But behavioral economics, the field that we emphasize a lot in this class, says that you have to look beyond just standard, the numbers, the money, and the time. You have to look at other things that change the way things and decisions and behaviors feel. And I think $120 a year would feel more daunting than $10 a month.
And I mean, they employ these things in these techniques in infomercials, where
it's a great example.
They're like, the Bowflex is $1,000, or 20 installments of $50, and then you feel actually like it's a cheaper item and that you could actually afford it. So $10 a month, especially with the pack of cigarettes, doesn't feel as costly as, oh geez, this is exactly what I'm paying $120 over.
So for the same reason you're trying to sell something, you break it into a bunch of small payments. If you're trying to stop people from doing something, put it in one big lump sum.
Exactly.
That's a great example. So you're kind of a money expert here in your research, at least, I don't know, in your own personal life, right? But I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about, because Avni's done some great research, which we again highlight in the class, but it shows a little bit of the strange, unconscious forces that influence consumer behavior, and it started with some research you did with people, whether they would buy a pen or not.
That's right. So we were really interested in variety. So what's the impact that, we are Americans, we love, variety is the spice of life, right? That's what we say. But what is that impact of variety on our own well-being?
Variety in terms of?
The number of products offered in a particular domain.
Well,
so
I think you go to a store, the one that's got the most choices should be best, right? I want to know that there's 900 types of shampoo.
Right, and now grocery stores, I think they sell over 1,000 different products, in different sectors.
And that's good for consumers, right?
That's what you think. Mm-hmm. So what we did was run this experiment. A person would walk up to a table, and they could choose to buy a $1 pen between two potential options. So about 30% of people bought. Mm-hmm. Great. Then we increased it to 4, then to 6, then to 8. We saw an increase.
With different people coming out to the table each time.
Totally different people coming each time, and they had a chance to buy a pen.
So I'd come up, and now there's 6 pens there instead of 2. Am I more likely to buy a pen?
Totally more likely to buy a pen.
Again, proving my point that in America, more choice is better.
That's what you think. Hold on one second. Now, so we go into about 10. That was our optimal level was around the 10 pen mark. 90% of people were buying. We're like, oh, that's fantastic. Now, we increased it to 12, to 14, to 16. And all of a sudden, less and less people are buying. More and more people are approaching the table and trying to use a pen and getting excited about it. But less and less people are purchasing. All the way down to we had 20 options, including the 10 that, I just said 90% of people bought. We had 20 options. This should really increase the chance for people to get their best option. Now only 30% of people bought. And if you remember that figure, that's the same amount that the percentage of people buying from 2 pens.
So if there's more choices, shouldn't more people find a choice they like?
That's what you think, but there's a cost, and you were talking about time cost a little bit earlier. There's a cost of evaluating each item, and people get overwhelmed by this. People get overwhelmed by the amount that they need, the amount of effort they need to exert to find that one. They also feel worse because there's the whole regret issue of, did I really choose the right one? Did maybe one of the other alternatives was better? And we see this all the time. And, my parents, this was one of the best examples for me. My parents wanted a TV. They had this old, huge, clunky TV. They spent 3 months going to a Circuit City, PC Richards, Best Buy, trying to search for this TV. And every weekend I would hear, we're going to go buy a TV. We're going to go buy a TV. This is very exciting. We're buying a TV. And then I'd call them in the evening. I'd be like, well, what am I getting to look forward to when I come home and visit you guys? Oh, we didn't buy a TV. It's too much. It's too much options. There's LED, 3D, LCD. They knew so much more information, but they felt worse and worse about choosing. Until finally I got it for them online, and they were stuck with it because I was actually really annoyed about
What a good daughter you are. A very good daughter.
No, it's impatience, really.
So this is, to me, an example of, I don't know if you call it irrational behavior or not, and I don't think we always need to harp on it, but it's a strange anomaly of choice, I'd say, that a consumer walks in and has more options and is so overwhelmed, probably cognitively, maybe even emotionally, they just walk away from getting anything. That is not necessarily something that's going to have huge harm on their lives. I'm not buying a pen, but first, in this course, we don't just talk about what the government can do. We talk a lot about industry's role here. Has industry learned anything from this line of research that's affected, help them do their jobs better?
So actually, there are a lot of folks that are trying to help out in this domain. There are people over in, I know in the UK, as well as in DC, that are looking to limit the amount of choice to certain popular options, and then they'll allow people to then seek more information and they can select whatever they want. But initially, just to provide a little less stress, a little less of the psychological stress, they're providing a little bit less upfront for how to pick certain Medicare plans, as well as for government employees, for pension and 401k plans. So they're actually trying to expose these things because it's in our best interest, obviously, to select, a good have some health insurance or have some retirement plan.
There's a great point. So I want to just kind of pinpoint two things there. One is just industry promoting its own interest, which is trying to sell products to people. There have been companies that have gone and reduced the varieties of shampoo, for example, that they put in the shelves and seen an increase in overall shampoo sales. So fewer products to choose from, but higher overall sales. So definitely, these are kind of things that business students need to know about. But there are times where this being overwhelmed by choice can harm people. And you mentioned the 501k, was that what?
401k.
401k, yeah.
I mean, that's the more advanced.
My wife is an MBA, she does all our finances. Okay.
Right.
So here, it would seem the best, according to economic theory, maybe traditional economic theory, more choice is better. So if you just give me lots of places I can put my retirement money, I should be better off. But what happens in practice?
So they were finding they wanted to really increase the amount of people that were satisfied and also chosen to a 401k retirement plan. But they found for each increase of 10 different types of 401k plans, there was a 1.5 to 2% decrease in the amount of people selecting.
So they walked away from retirement plans just like they walked away from the pens.
Right, and this was from researchers over at Columbia. Sheena Iyengar did the study, and so then she said, okay.
Now, this is in a case where the employer would be giving matching funds, is that right?
Yeah, they would be, in certain cases, they would also be giving some contribution. And so then they even looked at, okay, for the people that did select, what were they selecting? And how they weren't affected by this increasing variety. They already selected a fund, a 401k plan. Actually, what was really interesting is that even for those employees that actually selected a plan, when you increase the alternatives, they put more and more money into these safer bets, these equities, rather than putting money into energy and precious metals that were also these other fund choices. And what the explanation for all of this was we like psychologically safe choices, especially when we feel cognitively overwhelmed. And so initially with the pens or even choosing a retirement plan, when we get more and more options, we feel psychologically overwhelmed, and the safe thing to do is say, I don't think I'm equipped to make this choice, so I'm not going to at all. But then when we've made a choice, and we still get this increasing number of alternatives, and we're getting more and more psychological stress, the safest thing to do is to do what we know. And so then that's why people are selecting these equities. But that all can be avoided by just limiting the amount of choices we have to a certain thing that's even customizing, for example, and saying, okay, well, what are your certain preferences? Yeah. And then from those preferences, design a couple of options. And people could, of course, choose out of that and choose something else, but at least initially it gets them over that activation barrier to even make a choice to begin with.
And I think this is really important because if you think about it, if you walk away from any kind of retirement plan where your employer is giving a matching contribution, you are leaving free money on the table.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to argue that it's in anybody's best interests who came in thinking, I want to put money into retirement, who walked away because they just couldn't make a choice, that they were made better by that. And so a good employer, I think, would try to help structure the choices for people. Maybe even you give them the same amount of choices, but they're put in categories so they can just pick which category of fund they want the most. And then they can look to a simple set of choices within that. So you can kind of layer these choices. They can drill down deeper. But if you just hit everybody with, here's your 50 plans, it's a good way to make sure a bunch of people don't choose any plan.
Right.
So you've done some this kind of research on consumer overload, but you've also shown that there's another very strange thing that can make the choice feel different and help people from being overwhelmed.
Yeah, this is actually some recent work that I've done with John Payne and Jim Bettman, where we were actually
two faculty here at Fuqua.
Two Fuqua faculty in the marketing department, and we found that the way you pay, so when I say pay, it's cash versus credit and debit card, which is now becoming increasingly popular. The way you pay can actually affect how you perceive increasing variety, I mean, to a certain extent. So we ran the pen experiment once again. And so, again, from 2 through 10, we saw increased buying. that more people bought with 10 pence, the proportion of people buying with 10 pence increased in comparison to 2 pence. But then this weird thing happened. When people were paying with credit card instead, when we made people pay with credit card, then from 10 to 20, right? It's a cheap choice. It's a dollar pen, not a very big deal. While the cash, people paying with cash actually decreased their purchasing, just like before, the people with credit card and debit card, they actually kept purchasing. They kept purchasing at a really high rate.
So I come up and I'm thinking of buying something. And it's kind of a hard decision to make, which is actually emotionally painful.
Yeah.
I open up my wallet and I have to pay with cash. Taking green, crisp dollar bills on my wallet, that's painful too.
Absolutely.
Put the two pains together, I'm out of here.
Exactly.
But if I can open up my wallet and pull out my Duke Flex account or whatever it is, right? No pain, right? I mean, it doesn't even feel like real money.
With $1, you give it away, and it's gone. With the little Flex card, you give it away, they swipe, they give it back to you. Your wallet doesn't feel lighter, and you don't feel worse off. You don't feel as much of that. They call this pain of payment.
Yeah.
And what we were interested in was, well, how does that affect different behaviors? So what was going on is that people were spending less time making decisions.
Yeah.
And that could be good to a certain point. I mean, it could have helped my parents, for example, if they were choosing with TVs, they could have helped them a little bit. If they didn't feel as much of, oh, this is a really big deal, and they feel that much consequence, it could help with that. But there's a lot of detriment that could happen as well when you don't feel that pain and that self-regulation that money provides.
And so one of the psychological phenomena we do discuss in the class is credit card behavior, and it's one of the areas that's been under some regulatory scrutiny because it's so painless to pay with credit cards. The money feels so unreal to so many people that you do see a lot of people burdened by credit card debt in ways that deeply harm their lives. And then get credit card bills in the mail that are kind of inscrutable, that often start with something that says minimum monthly payment or minimum payment due, which really often people look and say, oh, phew, I only have to pay that much. And what they don't know is that if you pay the minimum, you're carrying a bigger balance forward, which is having a very high interest rate on it. And so some of the regulations that are out there are trying to get people to give the credit card companies to give people information. Okay, here's the minimum you can pay, but here, if you want to pay down your debt over the next 3 years, here's how much you need to give us a month to do that with the current level of debt. And so again, it's a regulation. It's a big bad government, right? But they're just trying to help consumers make better informed decisions, which is really in credit cards. It becomes a matter of math at some point. When you have an interest rate, that's in a percent, that's a compound interest rate. This is it's not a complicated thing for Fuqua alum. But for the general public, I'm really sad to say, and I've done a lot of this research in medical decision-making contexts where patients have decisions to make like, this treatment gives you this % chance of survival, this one gives you that. And then you go ask the general public, oh, I just want to make sure you understand these numbers. I'm going to quiz you, Avni. Fair coin, I'm going to flip it 1,000 times. What's your best guess of how many times it would come up heads?
500 times.
That's very good. I would have taken 450 to 550 as the correct answer, and even then, 1 out of 3 Americans will get that question wrong.
They will select outside of that?
Outside of that range.
Why?
Let's suppose that there is a disease, we'll call it chronic hot chocolitis. And 10% of people suffer from this disease, and it's a population of 1,000 people. How many people have that disease?
100.
Again, about another third of Americans will get that wrong. I ask one more question just as difficult, and about half of people in the United States will get at least one of those questions wrong. Now imagine these people get a credit card statement that talks about their annual interest rate. It talks about who can expect them to understand it. Now, they ought to do a better job of understanding what their money is and how they're spending it. I absolutely think people need to be responsible for their own behavior, but it's also really easy to bamboozle people when you know they're that bad at math.
And I mean, and also the credit card folks, they've exploit this because a minimum balance, that serves as a bit of an anchor.
Yeah.
Where then, oh, $10, oh, anything plus $10 is good. Versus if you said the minimum balance is, well, $100, depending on obviously how much your card statement says. But these things serve as anchors and basically encourage people in whether intentionally or not, to actually not pay these full amounts and accrue all this interest.
You know, another topic we talk about in the class is gambling behavior. And your credit card research has me a little worried about using credit cards around gambling situations. So if I'm potentially in a situation to gamble, is a credit card going to make me more or less likely to take risk?
Surprisingly, we hoped that it wouldn't be the case, but credit cards actually make you more risk-takey.
Risk-takey.
Risk-takey, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very new word that researchers have come up with now. And with cash, when people were placing bets, they actually were much more conservative. We call this, they were loss averse. They wanted to have more sure things, and they were less willing to select into gambles that had probabilities of less than 30% of winning. But with credit card or debit card or anything that was this less painful way of paying, people kept in and gambled and actually got excited by the reward.
Does this explain why we don't typically gamble with cash at machines?
What's the first thing that you do when you go to a casino?
I get a drink.
Okay, fine. What's the second thing that you do when you go to a casino? Okay, wait. What's the third thing
I do? Okay,
right.
Third thing I do is I guess I have to buy chips to play, right?
Right. You first, even at the blackjack table,
right,
you exchange all that very important money for these plastic chips.
Yeah.
And they all look alike too. So
they're like playthings.
Absolutely. And they're hoping, I mean, these folks are quite smart in using that strategy, because then you could just, I mean, imagine if every single time that you said, okay, all right, do you want to meet this bet or exceed this bet? You said, okay, fine, here's another $20, and you saw that crisp bill, go away, keep going. People wouldn't do that. So then they had tokens. And they found that people are much more risk-taking and more willing to continue playing when you use these less painful ways of paying, which is dangerous. However, what I think is interesting is that you still can use the same approach of, gambles have these lovely things of instant rewards, and they feel good, fun. It's entertainment.
Yep.
It's exciting, but we can still do this for more positive ways, and how we can increase people's well-being and health behavior. And one thing I was going to say is one of my favorite studies you talked about in class, and that was with medication compliance and adherence. Yeah,
so when we talk about gambling in the class, we don't come at it typically just on the standpoint, gambling bad, government must regulate. Instead, we try to get people to understand, what is the psychology of gambling? What do the gambling industry, what do they know about our behavior that we probably don't even understand? And that helps the students understand these phenomena, which often carry over to other domains of life. And they can be used for good or ill. And good example, a group of researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and Carnegie Mellon found recruited patients who were taking blood thinner pill called Coumadin. They probably had a heart rhythm irregularity where if they don't take this pill every day, they have a chance of a stroke. But it's a pill that doesn't change the way you feel, and so it's easy to forget taking it. And so people don't take it every day, get trouble. So how do you get them to take it more? Well, they tried some basic things. Hey, we'll pay you every time you take your pill. It had some effect. It had some effect, It's better to have money than not have money, right?
Okay.
But in one group of people, they said, every day you take your pill, and they actually had electronic monitors on the where the pills were being stored. So every time you opened it up, it'd show that you'd taken a pill. You get entered into a lottery, and you have a chance to win up to so much money per day. And they made sure that there was going to be, every once in a while, there was going to be a small win, probabilistically, and then every once in a while, you get a big win. Overall, the costs were probably less than paying you every day you take a pill. And they probably dwarfed in comparison to the actual cost of the pill. But what it turns out is just the thought of, hey, I don't like taking a pill, but every time I do it, I know that I've got a chance for something good to happen to me. That dramatically increased adherence to the pill. Adherence meaning they took the pill every day.
I think that's awesome. I think that's one of the nicest ways that we can actually encourage healthy behavior. People feel better about themselves. Now, are there any other examples of ways that we could, or do you have any suggestions of ways we could use this?
I mean, there's actually Singapore made use of this same phenomenon in trying to reduce traffic congestion around rush hour. So I guess if you get on a train in Singapore during rush hour, you really, really hope the guy next to you showered in the morning, because you are going to get to know them very well. And so they tried to give people an incentive to ride the trains either a little before rush hour or a little after rush hour to decompress things. And this has social benefits if you can do this, because you don't have to have so many train lines, so many conductors that you hire. It's more economically efficient.
When you say incentives, what do you?
Oh, I'll get to that. I mean, the other benefit is it's really miserable to be on a crowded train.
That's true.
Right? So they told people, hey, you have a chance. You can every day you ride outside of rush hour, we'll give you a 10% discount. That's one option. Maybe save $1 a day. Or you can enter a lottery. By riding the train at this hour, we're going to put your ticket number into a thing. And it's the expected value no better than the 10% discount that you get for certain every day. The vast majority of people chose the lottery, and rush hour traffic was dramatically reduced.
Why?
Because I got to play the lottery. Come on, it's fun. If it just means coming into the train 30 minutes early, and after a while you do that, talk about habits like we talked about earlier, pretty soon you realize it's more pleasant to ride earlier because I can actually sit down once in a while, and I get to work, and I get a little bit done before my boss arrives. So it's absolutely an example of using gambling for good purposes.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So what are other ways that you think that we can actually encourage people for especially non-government ways to improve well-being? So in terms of financial well-being, in terms of even healthier lifestyles, what are ways that you also can discuss to do this?
I think there's a myriad of things that people can do, and it really becomes very context specific. But I think the context that matters the most is this: are you learning about human behavior with the goal of manipulating people to your own ends and purposes, or with the goal of improving the world? And I know at Fuqua what we really try to do is we try to train the next generation of leaders in the business world to improve the world, not necessarily profit for profit's sake. And profit's a crucial part of business. Business won't survive if it doesn't make profits, but you can make profits in the tobacco industry. You can make profits in maybe an industry that doesn't sell a product that kills its customers. And one of the things we talk a lot about in the course, some questions coming along, is to get them to think about, when you learn this thing about human nature, think about how you're going to use it in the workplace, with the goal being, it's one example I use in the class, imagine you're in your deathbed, you're surrounded by your grandkids. What are you going to brag about to them about that you accomplished in your career? What will you be truly proud of in your last moments of your life? And this came up when one of the students in my class mentioned that she had a job at a credit card company, where her job was to develop a rewards program for the credit card company. You know, every time you use the card, you get a certain number of points. And it would attract a lot of people to get that card, but it would be designed in such a way that almost nobody would redeem the points. And a win-win situation for the credit card company was, we want lots of customers and nobody getting all the freebie, right? And the class then just had a nice heated discussion about, gee, is that a good job to have? Is that a noble pursuit? Is that how you want to take your knowledge of human behavior and use it in the workplace? And we all have to decide what kind of lives we want to lead. But it's really nice to take a chance, a bit of time while people are in business school, to have them reflect on what their goals in life are. I know a couple of questions have come in. I'll hand one to you and one to me. Why don't you start what we have there?
So someone asked, do people change behavior when they are taught or informed as to why they're making poor choices?
Yes and no. My favorite example of no is, getting back to the obesity example, if you remember from the webcast, there are strange things that influence how many calories we eat that we're unaware of. The size of the dinner plate is one example, or the size of a cup we use. Brian Wansink, who's done a lot of that research, teaches a course on food eating behavior. And at the end of the semester, after people have seen dozens and dozens of the studies he's done that show these strange little things that influence what people eat and how much they eat, he holds a party. And one year, and of course, when you're a professor, you hold a party, you run an experiment. So one year he ran this at a chicken wing restaurant. And unknown to his students, who just spent a semester learning about unconscious influences on eating behavior, he had talked to the restaurant before the party began, and he said, on tables 1, 3, 5, and 7, I want the waiters, waitresses, anytime more than 4 chicken wings show up on the discard plate in the middle, I want them to whisk it away and put a fresh plate out. And on tables 2, 4, 6, and 8, just let them pile up. And it turns out that students who knew all about his tricks ate way more chicken wings when the visual evidence of their consumption was removed, quickly removed. They just kept plowing down, chowing down on, and if you saw them piling up, you're like, ooh, yeah, I have put away a few. I should probably stop. So yeah, a whole semester of teaching, and they still fell for the next trick.
Oh, man. Okay, so then what's a way that actually hopefully people have changed their behavior? Do you know?
Do you know any? I mean, it's tough. These things, I think you see some of the leading researchers in the field making these same mistakes.
One thing that I think was neat is that a lot of times there's this misconception that increased price also is increased quality. And so, for example, people will evaluate the same product, if it is $50, as much better than if the same product is $30. But if you actually tell people that, and you remind them that, remember, there is this, do you think price actually changed your perceptions? Right before they answered any questions or even thought about which one to purchase, do you think price matters? Then all of these effects actually did wipe away. But you did have to remind them. And so I think, I mean, it's difficult, but there are ways for us to get reminded that, okay, you don't need to pay extra for certain things.
Yeah.
Oh, if you remember that, one example is that there is, I found this out, I was on the plane, I traveled just recently, and a Boy Scout next to me I was telling him all about this, the pain of payment,
Was he
cash.
wearing his Boy Scout
Absolutely,
garb?
yes.
That's so cute.
There was a crew of them. And he was like, oh, so
Troop.
what do you, yeah, right. There was a troop of them.
Yeah.
And he was saying, so what are you working on? Where are you going? And I was telling him, I'm presenting this research on cash versus credit card and feeling very, very smart. I'm, this PhD student. And, it's really important if you want to curb your payments to use cash. And he was like, oh, yeah, because credit cards are more, it's easier to spend more and you're more willing to pay. He just started citing off all these facts. First, then I said, okay, maybe he's actually another PhD student, also, just a Boy Scout. And I was like, well, how old are you? And he says, 15. I said, where do you know this? And he said, David Ramsey. And so there's all these people, such as this David Ramsey guy, that are also encouraging and teaching people, hey, if you know this about your own behavior, that that you make poor choices about your spending patterns, carry cash.
Yeah.
And you're also you're limiting the amount that you get rid of that credit card for these small purchases when you're going out to grocery stores or these things, and carry cash will limit your consumption. So I do think people have started to then change their behavior.
Yeah,
once
no, I think
out.
if you're deeply immersed in these phenomenon, I think you do become aware of yourself, but it takes time and it's not automatic. It really isn't. Another question came in. When organizations implement interventions to improve consumer behavior, how can they frame it so it's not seen as limiting free will? Now, I was a philosophy major as an undergrad, so I won't go into a philosophical discourse on free will, which I don't know what it is or what it means, right? But I think this is really important. I think whenever you're trying to maybe help people behave and make this in ways that are better for their own interests or make smarter decisions in their life, the more you can do that in a way that maximizes free choice, free will, the better. But I honestly don't know where free will begins and ends. I see it on a continuum. And I'll give you an example. This is one that Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein write about in their book Nudge, which has brought a lot of attention to these issues. It's a simple example of going through a cafeteria. And as you're going through the line, you've got your tray, and you take the first couple of items, you put it on the tray starts getting full, you slide it down, you put some more items on, and then at the end you check out. What they find out is, if I put the desserts up fairly early in the line, people will have a higher percentage of their tray filled with desserts than if the desserts are the very last thing. That if you want to get people to eat vegetables and fruits, you put them out in an attractive way early in the line. And so many people have no doubt set up cafeteria lines without any thought to what order they'll put the food in. It might just be more of a practical thing of what fits where, what can plug into what. They unknowingly have influenced what you will get when you go through the cafeteria line. Now, have they limited your free will? You're still free to choose anything you want. Have they influenced your choice? They have. The question now is, once you're aware of that, if you're trying to help your customer make good choices, is it okay to arrange the items in the cafeteria in a way you think will make them choose better items? Or you could say items with a higher markup. You could choose whatever goal you want, but you will be influencing behavior by how you organize the food in the cafeteria. And once you're aware of it, you actually, I think, have a responsibility to think about what the best way to do it is. And still, people still have free will, and yet they're still influenced. It's a kind of an interesting paradox.
Another interesting, you know, to piggyback off what you just said, Walmart actually has now started, upon suggestions from different researchers, to actually in the checkout aisle, where there's a lot of these really exciting, you know, chocolate products and these impulse buys, to put a little bit more fruits, actually. And they've seen, they have bananas, they have a couple oranges, and it's just right near the checkout. People actually started purchasing more of those things because they're like, oh, I'm hungry. They feel hungry going throughout the store. And if a banana is right there, why not take it?
Yeah.
But normally the chocolate is there. And that's one way that, you know, obviously you still have your free will of not choosing and not forcing anything. But it's a gentle nudge to improve well-being.
Another question, this is actually a question for you, Avni. Is the availability of cash from ATMs a temptation to spend more cash?
I think yes, absolutely. That once you have easier access, one thing that increases spending is that you, or rather I should say decreases spending, is that you feel like a limitation. Your wallet is getting lighter and lighter, and so you have this internal checkpoint. And so I think absolutely is the case. The availability of cash now is becoming easier and easier to replenish. And a funny story about that, I walked into the Bank of America where I bank, and one of the tellers was telling me about this hilarious story about a guy that started cutting his ATM cards because he actually found that he was doing this.
So this was a way of him almost controlling his own
his
impulses.
spending. And so I do think that is absolutely the case because he said, oh, I just find it too easy then to go up to one of the nicely located ATMs and get more money. So when I find myself doing that, I cut them. But the reason why the bank teller was telling the story was because then he kept going back to the bank because he needed a new ATM card. So that's
we talk about self-control a fair amount in this course too, because it's another one of those things that influence our behaviors, often in ways we're unaware of. It's also a marketing opportunity. So I'll give you the standard example. Self-control might be: I go to bed at night, determined to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and go for a jog before I come into work. Alarm goes off at 5:30, and what do?
Snooze.
Bang! You hit the snooze button, you're done. So you have the self deciding about the future is often a much better self than the self deciding right on the moment. And there are companies that recognize this problem, and one, I think they made a product called Clocky. It not only goes off in the morning, but it's designed to move away from where it sits along the side of the bed.
That's terrible.
And you actually have to get out of bed, chase the clock down to turn it off. So it forces you out of bed. And it's a way that someone says, I want Clocky because I don't trust my future self, so I need Clocky to do that for me. So again, a lot of the behaviors that we talk about here, again, I don't know where free will begins or ends here. I don't know which self ought to make that decision, but there's ways you can almost say, I'm going to take away my free will in the morning to hit the snooze button, and I'll be better off for it.
In a similar way, they found that there's a lot of psychology research right now that showed that joining certain support groups to talk about either how you saved or what exercises you're doing or how you actually chose to do choose healthier options instead of fatty options, that actually documenting that will then actually make you choose totally different things. That you'll become much more aware of your savings because you're like, well, I'm going to report this to my group, even though you don't know who the other people are in terms of their actual identities, just their online presence. But that's actually been successful in, decreasing the amount of spending, increased, healthier living, exercise, as well as decreasing unhealthy food intake, because you have to respond to a community, and that's that same sort of thing of that my future self, I know that I'm going to have to respond, and I don't want to feel my goals decrease, and this is a nice self-regulation way to improve well-being.
We could talk all day, but we're going to wind things up now. These were great questions, and I'm really eager to take more questions as they come up, because I think this is a rich and thick topic. It's one that I learn a lot by interacting with other people and hearing what their questions are. I love teaching here at Fuqua because I get to learn from students who come from many different business backgrounds, and I hear about their experience, so it's a blast. And what I'll do is I will put a link to this webinar onto my website, which is peterubel.com, and there can be, I'll leave a comment sheet underneath. You can ask, if you ask any questions on there, I'll make sure to get back, or Avni will get back with some answers on that. I'm sure that Fuqua will also have a link to that. But I think that'll wrap up what we're talking about today, and I want to thank everybody for your questions both before the session began and during the session. I'm really glad we had this conversation. This is a lot of fun. Yeah.
Peter, I just wanted to ask you, if you could just say 1 or 2 tips and points that people can think about ways that, to nudge behavior. What are the couple points for these lovely Fuqua alums?
Well, I'd start by reading my book, Free Market Madness. This is not prearranged plug, actually.
No.
So I think you do need to read up on the topic. These are things you want to think about. The book Nudge is another awesome example. Gives lots of illustrations of the phenomena that influence our behavior. Dan Ariely's best-selling books, another Fuqua faculty, like Predictably Irrational, help you get a sense that human nature is much more complicated than just rational decision-making. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
It was a blast to talk with you. We have another faculty presenter coming up in August. That's Gavin Fitzsimmons. He's destined to be entertaining and provocative and informative. He's great. He's a professor of marketing and psychology here, and more information will be coming soon up on the Fuqua website to tell you about the details of that conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Have a great day.